This is B30.
Okay, and just 1 second, we have the court reporter changing paper. Please be seated. You're set? Have a seat, sir, and the attorneys are going to begin their questioning, and we're going to, can you hear me okay?
I'm having a hard time. I'm a little hard of hearing.
Okay, do we have... Okay, juror B30, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now.
There's a volume control on that device.
Thank you.
Okay. The attorneys are going to be asking you some questions about the questionnaire, and we're going to start with Mr. De La Ronda.
Okay. Please support.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
My name is Bernie De La Riona. We're going to be referring to you as Mr. B30, if that's all right.
I'd rather be 30 than be 65, which I am.
I'm not far behind you, but obviously you filled out the questionnaire and we had an opportunity to review it, so I want to ask you some questions regarding that.
Okay.
And so you know what we're doing today, right?
Right.
Now. Okay. And you put on there on the questionnaire that you had heard about Trayvon Martin was shot and killed, and then you had other stuff about being accused, that George Zimmerman was accused of that crime, and that he was a neighborhood watch person. Is that what basically you remember, either from TV or the newspaper or something?
Yeah, I really didn't follow the case that much. I really don't watch news TV, and so that's basically what I know about it.
Is the reason why you don't watch news TV because it's not always completely accurate? You know, like, I don't know if you watch Fox News, but they talk about fair and balanced, or what's your reason why you don't watch TV? You're just not interested at all?
I'm just not really interested in the news. There's a lot of too much negative things instead of good things.
Yes. Let me see if I can pin you down in terms of when you recall hearing about this. Was it about the time when it happened back in February of last year, or was it recently?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
The latter, it was back in February of 2012?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And other than what you've written here on your questionnaire, do you remember at this time anything else that you might have watched on TV about the case?
I remember, I believe that Trayvon Martin was up here spending some time with his dad, and he was out walking one night, and the defendant came in contact with him somehow, and there was a scuffle and a gun went off. So.
Yes, sir. Okay. Now, after you saw it on TV, did you follow it at all? I know you don't like to watch the news, but did that specific case, because it happened here in Sanford, get your attention and you focused on it, or did you just treat it like any other case?
Yeah, I just got it in drips and drabs. Matter of fact, we were having dinner one night with my girlfriend downtown Sanford, and one of the news stations asked us some questions about it, and I just told them I didn't really know any of the facts, so I just hold off any response until I found out, what it was about. So.
Sure. Have you paid closer attention to it once you found out that you were on jury duty? Most people don't get excited when they get that jury summons, but...
Well, I didn't know what trial I was going to be on, but of course the people that I was around going, oh, you're lucky you're going to get picked for that trial.
Sure. Did those people that were talking about the case, did they give you their opinions about the case as to the guilt or innocence of the defendant?
And they did, but I tried not to listen.
Okay.
I told them I
right.
just left the room.
Here's the question. The law says that people can be, we don't expect people to live as hermits somewhere in a cave somewhere, but people can be exposed to media in terms of publicity about the case. And the question is, whatever you were exposed to, do you believe you can set that aside and make a decision only on what happens in this courtroom? That is, where all the parties are present, the judge is present, and you hear the evidence, you hear the facts, and you then give the law. Do you think you can do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sometimes also in a trial, you're sitting as a juror, you're picked, you're listening to the evidence, and then you realize, oh, I've heard something about the case on TV or, on the internet or whatever, saw it on the internet. Do you realize that whatever you recall, cannot come into your decision-making process, that you can only make your decision on what actually happens in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you think you would have a problem with that if by chance you're sitting as a juror and you remember something, you go, you understand you can't talk to any of the jurors about that? Do you think you could do that?
Yes,
No?
sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
In your question, and one of the questions that was asked was in terms of whether you had heard about or seen something on TV, whether you had formed an opinion. I think you stated you had not formed an opinion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I gather this time you come to this courtroom with a blank slate. In other words, you're willing to listen to the evidence that comes out of the courtroom and make your decision based on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the other thing is the hearing, you're able to hear me all right. I'm a little bit hard of hearing too, but you can hear me all right now with that
Yes,
help?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. You live in this community. How long have you lived here all your life, or a substantial part of your life?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you, after hearing about the case since it happened here, did you do any searching on the internet or, Twitter or all this other stuff, all these blogs and stuff? Or
No,
you're
no,
not
sir.
mess with that?
No, I'm not a tech-savvy person.
All right. How about your girlfriend or anybody else? Did they tell you, hey, I'm doing some stuff here. Look what's on the internet about this case?
No, sir.
Okay. And I gather you haven't read anything about it, or if you did, do you recall what you read?
No, I haven't read anything about it.
The time you watched it on TV, do you recall whether that was a local broadcast or whether it was like a national show?
It was, that week that it happened, so it was on different, searching TV every once in a while.
Right. Channel surfing or-
Channel surfing, it would come up and,
Sure. How about after that, February 2012, there's been proceedings, or did you watch any of the other proceedings after that up to this point?
No, sir.
You mentioned that you were at was it a restaurant or somewhere downtown,
Downtown
and somebody
Sanford.
mentioned something to you about the case? Did I get that right?
We were coming out from a restaurant downtown Sanford one night, and I think it was Channel 2 newscaster was there on the corner and just stopped our group and asked us individually what we thought.
Sure. Okay. Did that happen within the last few weeks, or did it happen a while ago?
It happened probably at least 2 or 3 months ago.
Okay. Just out of the blue, they started asking people what they thought about the case?
Yeah, I think there was something about the case that was going on at the time, and, that...
Sure. Do you recall what you told that newscaster? And by the way, do you remember with the newscaster whether it was a man or a woman? Or
It was a woman.
Okay. And do you remember whether that actually came out? In other words, whether it was broadcast? A lot of times they'll talk to 20 people and they may only broadcast 1 or 2.
Yeah, I can't remember if I was on the news or my son-in-law or my daughter was on the news. They talked to all of us, so...
Okay. I guess my question is, after you knew that it was going to be on TV, did you pay attention? Oh, let's see if I got on TV.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Sure. Do you remember whether you appeared on TV or not? Or whether,
I don't believe I did.
okay. Do you think one of your family members may have?
I think one of my family members, but I think my daughter did, or my son-in-law.
Sure. Did any of your family members express, or your in-laws express a given opinion about the case?
Oh, I'm sure they did at the time, but,
Okay. After that setting in the restaurant or outside the restaurant, did you all go home and talk about it some more and say, wow, now let's talk about the case, or on the way home or anything?
I'm sure we probably did, but I don't remember the,
Here's the question I've got for you regarding that. As a result of being exposed, not through the media directly, but through family members, did you form an opinion about the case as a result of that? Did they convey one way or the other their opinions, and as a result, force you to have an opinion one way or the other?
not really, no.
Okay. So they weren't that persuasive, I guess, if they...
Yeah, no, they were, you know, kind of bringing up a point of one person and then bringing up a point of another person, you know.
So they had differing opinions about the case?
Different opinions on it, yeah.
Okay. And one wasn't more persuasive than the other?
Right, yes.
Okay, all
Yes,
right.
sir.
Now, again, if you're picked as a juror and you're sitting there, and then you go, oh, wow, my son-in-law or my daughter or whatever said this, that was really relevant now that I think about it. If that came into your mind at that time, do you know that under the law you cannot consider that? Do you think you can do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me have a moment, Your Honor. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Honor. Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
If you have any problems understanding me as we talk, I'm presuming that device they have on helps.
Yes, it does, sir.
I will on occasion mumble or not be as specific as I should be. Put your hand up or just do something that lets me know that you're not understanding me, if you would. Without that device on, do you have sort of a true loss of hearing?
Yes, I do.
Okay. That's just ongoing?
No, it's, I played in a band for 20 years.
Oh, okay.
It went by the wayside there.
Fair enough. You had mentioned, we may have another opportunity to talk to you, but right now we're talking about what you know about the case. So a lot of my questions, as the state's were, is going to talk to you about that issue. If that opens up other areas of discussion, let me know. We may go into them now, we may go into them later, but I don't want to miss on an opportunity for you to tell me something you believe it to be relevant for us to talk about, okay?
Okay.
So if it opens up, we'll talk about it, and we may finish now or finish later. You had said a couple of things that sort of caught my mind when you were talking a moment ago. I'm just going to go back to the event a couple of 3 months ago when you were approached by the news media. And let me, as a premise, let me tell you why I'm going to be asking you some of these questions. We know that this case has had a certain amount of publicity. And then from that, we need to know what it is that you know about it. Not because knowing about it's bad or good, just that if we can figure that out, then we can address it now rather than later. So I may ask you questions that sort of push your memory on things, and the purpose is because I'd much rather you remember now than later. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So a couple months ago, you're leaving a restaurant in Sanford, and Channel 2 or somebody comes up to you, and you'd mentioned that you thought there was something going on in the case. Think back for me, if you would, and tell me now, if you can remember, what it was in the case that sort of caused the media to have a little bit of an upsurge in it.
No, I can't recollect at all, and it might have been further back than a couple of months ago, actually. It might have been 4 or 5 months ago.
Okay. Do you remember at all the subject of what brought it back to the media's attention?
No,
And when they were talking to you about the case, that your group, I think you said, there were differing opinions?
no, they asked me the question, what do you think about the case? And I said, well, I haven't formed an opinion yet because I don't know all the facts. And basically, I think they interviewed my daughter and my son-in-law, and they pretty much said the same thing.
Okay. Do you recall, were they asking you about a particular aspect of the case?
No, they just asked that particular question, I believe, at the time.
Literally, what do you think about the case?
Yeah.
Did they talk about anything in particular, like its effect on Sanford, a town that you've lived in all your life?
If they did, I don't recollect that.
Okay. Can you recall what, since you were there, to the extent you were there and listening, what the other people in your group, how they responded?
I can't recollect either. All I know is we pretty much gave the same response. We don't know all the facts, so we couldn't really say. You know?
Okay. Tell me then, based on what you have heard, anything about your opinion about the case?
My opinion about it?
Right now, sure.
All I know is that from what I've heard from other people, that there was fault on both sides as far as what I could see. You
Okay.
know, it was two people being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and two people instigating something that probably could have been avoided, you know, if they weren't there. So, you know, I couldn't give you a definite opinion on it until I hear more of the facts about it, and about all I've heard from TV and friends and that, which is not much over the last year or so that it's going on. I was pretty much grieving my wife's death for this whole time this was going on, so I wasn't really thinking about Mr. Zimmerman or Mr. Martin at all, really. So we just happened to be out that night, and they asked us that question. And as far as an opinion goes, I couldn't tell you, you know, one way or the other. I'm just, you know, pretty much an open space right there.
Okay. Sorry for your wife's loss and for the
Well,
grieving
thank
that
you.
you went through with that. Of course, there was some grieving going on in the Martin family, having
Right.
lost their son.
Right.
Actually, seeming like the same time that you lost your wife, or thereabouts?
I think maybe what was going on, the other lawyer mentioned this, it's kind of bringing back a little bit of my memories. I think the father might have been, or the mother of Trayvon Martin might have come on the news and was, you know, had an interview at the time or something, and it caused more talk as far as the case goes. So, I don't know if it was 6 months ago, you know.
Sure.
It was a while back, I know that.
Looking back now that I've mentioned that,
I was probably last year sometime.
Okay.
But from there till now, you know, until just when I got my summons and found out it was today, and my family right now has just been talking about it in little bits and pieces over the last couple of days. So as far as that goes, you know, I haven't really heard the facts. You know, I know there was a 911 call at one point, and lately I've heard somebody talking about they were trying to figure out who was doing the screaming on the 911 call. So
Okay.
that's basically what I've heard the last couple of days that's been in the news. So, but I haven't paid much attention to it, just that fact. I knew they were trying to figure that out. I think I've seen you on the news a couple of times, but, you know, being sliding past, because when I turn my TV on, it comes on to Channel 13 News, so whatever's on, until I can figure out what I'm going to, I listen to for a second until I can figure out what I'm going to watch that night. So.
Sounds great. You must be a Bright House customer then, I guess, right? That's
Yeah,
a Bright
I'm a-
House default.
Right.
I mentioned a moment ago that you're going through a grieving period of time, at the same time the Martin family was.
Yeah.
In a strange way, did you feel any commonality with what they were going through and what you were going through because of the loss near at the same time?
No, not the same kind of grieving, but it's anytime you lose a child, you know, it's, especially your own child, you know, it's got to it's gotta hurt, you know. So I imagine I did sympathize with them in that respect. You know, I would hate to lose a child too.
Sure. Obviously, that type of sympathy is both human and expected.
Right.
We have to divorce ourselves a little bit when we talk to people like you about that, just to make sure that while we're not going to expect you not to be human, that an event like that, particularly if you had a bit of a connection of some sort, is not going to cause you to sway in favor of the Martin family and their part in this as you look at the case.
Right.
So tell me how you would guard against that.
Well, I'm sure that from what I hear, recollecting now that Trayvon Martin was up here with his dad because he had some problems down in where he lived at, I believe in Miami. Was it Miami?
I'm not going to inject what I remember of the facts, only
Right.
because I want to focus on what you remember. But yeah, just tell me what you do.
And I remember that he was in some sort of trouble down there, and that's why he was up here with his dad. So, you know, like I say, I don't know all the facts, so I can't really come to a conclusion, you know. And, I like to try to get all the facts before I try to make a decision on that, the way I would feel, the way I would judge.
You were saying that you remember that he was up here with his dad. What else were you talking about?
That's about it.
Okay. And I was going to then ask you if you remember, now that we're talking about sort of the memories coming back up, in the past 16 months since this event, you've now told me about a few things. One, the event a couple months ago or so, a few months ago with Channel 2. And then you also told me that in the past couple of days that you had heard some information about the issue of who was screaming.
Right.
Tell me what, just sort of start, let's use that as a chapter for a moment, and just start at the beginning of that chapter of what you first remember hearing about this issue regarding who was screaming. And what I'm going to ask you to do, not to make it more complicated, is tell me when you heard it and who you heard it from.
I heard it on the news probably yesterday or the day before that, and they were replaying the screaming, and they had an expert on the witness stand trying to decide who it was, and they were speculating, the news media, and were speculating with different experts on whose voice that might have been and how important it was for the case for either one of the people involved.
Was this, were you actually watching the hearing live, or were you watching a summary of it on the news, or both?
I think it was a summary. I'm not sure. I was over at my daughter's house, and she had it on, and I was over there for a few minutes and sat and listened to it for a few minutes. And I don't know if it was pre-recorded or happening right then.
My understanding is that it was actually carried live, so that you may have actually seen some of the hearing. Did you hear or see a particular expert who was actually speaking?
All I remember is they had a fuzzy picture of an expert speaking about it on the news, like he was sitting in a fog. I guess they had a bad connection.
And that was the person who you were listening to?
That's the person I didn't listen to him really very much. I wasn't paying much attention to it. I was just in passing. I was listening and he was talking, but I would catch smidgens of it from other lawyers that they were talking about what he was saying.
Oh, so some other lawyers were commenting on what he was saying?
Right.
Okay. Do you remember any of the opinions of those lawyers striking a chord with you?
Not really. It just seems to me that they weren't, I'm guessing, I think they said that they weren't sure, or one might have been saying it was George Zimmerman, the other one might have been saying it was George Martin, Trayvon Martin, and how important it was to figure out which one it was, but I never really got an answer to that question.
Okay. And do you recall any of the lawyers, I asked if any lawyers' opinions struck a chord with you, any of the lawyers' opinions where you thought they were just wrong or just disagreed with their insight on the case?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you say that you actually listened to the tape being played of the screaming on the, what we are calling the 911 tape?
I listened to it for maybe 3 or 4 seconds in passing.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I asked you right now whose voice it was, what would you say?
I couldn't tell you if it was anybody's voice. It sounded like a woman to me.
Okay. Did you make any opinion or any suggested opinion in your mind as to who it might have been?
No. No, sir.
So we've now talked about the last couple of days, and you mentioned what you just did about the sound hearing with the experts regarding the voice. Anything else that you've talked about with other people about this?
My girlfriend had her opinion about it, and she thinks that, she told me she thought that Mr. Zimmerman should have stayed in his car, and that could have alleviated the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, I'm sorry?
That's what she told me.
Tell me about that conversation.
She was talking with her daughter at the time, and this was happening probably yesterday or the day before, the same time that I was kind of listening to the other bits and pieces that were coming in. But that's all they talked about. They talked about that Mr. Zimmerman probably should have stayed in his car because he had, I think, made a call to the people that on the watch, or he might have called 911, or he called the people on the watch, whoever the watch are, the police, and they said, just stay in the car, somebody's going to come.
Okay.
And that's all I overheard about it.
And you heard it from your girlfriend and her daughter?
Right.
They were discussing that?
Right.
Do you have any independent recollection about having heard the non-emergency call or any information about that portion of the case?
Not really, sir. No.
Okay. Let's just use that as an example and say that you have that thought in mind, right? We're not going to ask you to just ignore it. We just want to make sure that we all know you have that memory. If the evidence was presented from witnesses and whoever that conflicted with that interpretation of what happened. If the evidence says, for example, that he was already out of the car when he may have been told to do something or not do something. If, in fact, that...
As to facts in terms of the case, not what this witness.
Let's keep this non-case specific.
Except, Your Honor, if I might be heard, if in fact this witness has, and the way I've couched the question was if this witness has a case-specific fact that he's bringing into the courtroom with him, I only couched it in terms of if it's conflicted with actual evidence. My question to him was going to be what?
You can ask that question.
That's just what I was heading.
What he has heard or what he has overheard or read,
okay.
If it conflicts with the evidence in the courtroom, you clearly can ask that question.
So, okay, thanks. If then the evidence that you hear, you have this sort of thought from talking to your girlfriend and her daughter that Mrs. Zimmerman was told not to get out of the car and then he did. Is that accurate?
That's what I understand.
Okay. All right. if in fact the evidence was presented from the witness stand that conflicted with what you heard from your girlfriend or your girlfriend's daughter, what they may believe to be true, if this evidence conflicted with that, which would you rely on?
I would listen to the facts as far as, they don't really know what happened. They weren't there.
At that point, how much weight would you then give your girlfriend and your daughter's story or interpretation of what they thought happened?
I wouldn't give it any weight. I'd have to listen to the facts of what was produced in this court.
Would you be okay going back after the verdict and telling your girlfriend and your daughter that facts were different in the courtroom than what I thought or what you thought?
You better believe it, yeah. And I can tell you this, I have this hearing problem. So when I go into a room and I hear a lot of voices, I have a hard time picking out a voice. So I wear these headphones to watch TV so a lot of times I'm not wearing those headphones when I walk into my daughter's house or my girlfriend's house. So when they're talking about this case or I'm hearing it on the TV, a lot of times I'm not really hearing it. I'm just kind of getting pieces of it, So that's why I'm kind of vague on a lot of these things, because I really didn't have my headphones on and listening to somebody explain it to me. The only thing I can say for certain was that the conversation that she had between her and her daughter.
Okay. Is this case a topic of conversation with your girlfriend and her daughter more than just what we've now talked about, that one event?
No, not just recently until they found out I was going to have jury, and it came in the same time as this case, which was probably 2 or 3 days ago or a few days ago when we realized that I was going to be here on jury duty the 10th of June. So.
And what other conversations did you have with her about this case since then?
None. I never initiated any conversations about this case.
Okay.
They were just trying to say, what could you get out? How could you get out of jury duty? And they said, well, just go, what?
Just so we're clear, you blew that shot.
I blew that shot, especially when she came up with these. That's fine. I'm retired. I have nothing else in the world to do but play golf, and
Okay.
this is much more interesting.
We had now talked about a few of the little snippets along the way. We talked about the Channel 2 incident. Did your group go up to Channel 2? Did they go up to you? Did they tell you why they approached you, or how did that happen?
We just came out of the restaurant, and they were standing, the restaurant's right on the corner in Sanford there, and they were right on the corner, and we just happened to come out, and they were standing there, and they stuck a mic in my mouth and started talking.
Okay. Do you, I think you said that you don't look or listen to news very much because it's just, there's nothing, I think you said it's just all negative.
Yeah.
When you do watch news, or if you do decide I'm going to listen to news and find out about the tornadoes or what's going on with the NSA or whatever's in the news today, are there particular stations that you do go to?
Not necessarily. Like I say, when my TV turns on, it goes to Channel 13. And
I'm going to throw out a few and see if these are choices that you would go to or not. Fox, CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, any of those that you say that's the one I watch if I watch?
I never watch any of them.
Okay. No national news?
Never.
And if you decide to watch local and it wasn't going to be 13, the default station on Bright House, which one would you go to?
I couldn't say because I don't really watch hardly any news at all. So what I get is what I see on Channel 13 and Usually I just wait for the weather report.
Okay. Have you heard about some of the rallies that were had in Sanford?
You know, I'm going to object, Your Honor, to interjecting facts that this witness is not aware of.
My response? I do believe that I'm allowed to inquire as to certain events to
Well,
prompt.
you're the one who suggested.
Correct.
What
I'm
it
allowed to
was.
inquire as to certain events to see whether or not that prompts his memory as to whether or not he was there. If he says no.
I'll give you the leeway, go ahead.
Thank you. Are you aware of some of the rallies that have occurred in Sanford over
No.
the past year?
Not really.
I gave you one warning on saying not really to a
Yeah.
lawyer. We have to ask you what you mean by that.
In passing, yes, I heard that there were, I can't really say. I know that there've been some rallies, but that's about it. You know, I didn't know the specifics about them.
Okay. Do you know anyone who's ever been to one?
No.
Might just have a moment, Your Honor. Thanks. A couple more questions, if I might, sir. I'm going to quickly summarize. You've talked to a few people in the past couple of weeks, and then I think you said that you heard something about it back when it happened. If I asked you to tell me a number, realizing it's not going to be completely accurate, but a number of times you've discussed this case with other people, how many do you think it's been?
And then what, since the case?
Since the beginning.
Since the beginning? 2 or 3.
Okay. And times that you've seen it or heard it through the media?
Probably about the same.
The reason why we go through some of these questions is to make sure that we try and get through what you remember about the case now, as opposed to when you're sitting on the panel.
Yes, sir.
So that's why I even prompt with things like I ask you a specific question about something. But now that we've spent a few minutes talking about it, is there anything else that you believe that you have a memory of, an insight on, or something that you know about the case that we should talk about now rather than you remembering it or talking about it with your fellow jurors? Anything else out there, anything having to do with this case that we can talk about here now?
No, sir.
Anything else that you think that you need to tell us about within this context of pretrial publicity that we haven't talked about?
No, sir.
Anything in that publicity that we've talked about, and I appreciate both your thoroughness through my questions, that would affect your ability to give the state a fair trial based only on the issues we've talked about here? Anything?
No. No, sir.
Anything that would prohibit you at all from giving Mrs. Zimmerman a fair trial based upon this issue?
No, sir.
Thanks for the time.
You're welcome.
Counsel, when you're ready, approach. very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, let's bring in our next potential juror.
I'm sorry, you announced the number, but I wasn't.
I didn't announce the number yet because I don't know. I just said the next potential juror.
B-76, Your Honor.
Thank you. And juror B-76, the attorneys are going to ask you some questions, and we're going to start with Mr. De La Ronda.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Bernie Del Riondo. I'm going to, with all due respect, refer to you as B-76, if that's all right.
That's fine.
Okay. And you obviously filled out a questionnaire, so we have some information about what you know about the case. I'm going to follow up with some questions about that.
Okay.
You mentioned here that you wrote down, I guess, as best you could, what you recall. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I need you for the record to say yes or no, because I know when you said, I could understand what you're saying, but that court reporter needs to have an answer.
Okay.
We
Yes.
could. Did you run out of room in terms of the lines that we gave you there? Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. It seemed just from reading it that you had more information, and that's what I want to try to ask you about if we could. Spend a few moments on that. You stated that, well, let me backtrack a second. What else do you remember that you didn't have an opportunity to write on here?
I don't know if I mentioned that in the news it showed that there was a gun involved, and I believe that was Zimmerman's gun.
Okay, yeah, it doesn't have it here, but
Yeah.
we can give it to you if you need to look at it. Okay?
I know he got injured,
I'm sorry.
through the news media. He was injured in the head, so I saw some videos. He was a security guard, I believe, for that community. And I think, from what I heard in the news media, he had like an interaction with the young man. And there was like a struggle.
Okay.
And the gun went off. And then the young man died, and Zimmerman was injured through the struggle.
Okay. You also notated here that you saw a partial trial regarding, if I'm reading correctly,
Yes.
Regarding community funds raised to support Zimmerman's defense.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
I remember seeing his attorney arguing that, I'm not sure which judge it was, but that the funds being raised, I guess it was a question about the amount or where the funds came from, where like maybe some of it was in his account or he had access to it, something like that.
Okay. The end result of what you put here, and I didn't mean to cut you off, was there anything else you remember now that you've had an opportunity to reflect even more than from what this morning?
Not really.
Okay. And I gather from what you have gleaned from the case, you stated you had not formed an opinion, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the reason I asked you, just one of the questions said, if you have formed an opinion, you said no, and then the next question was, and sometimes it's confusing the way the questions were asked, you said, if you had formed an opinion, you could set it aside. So if I understand you correctly, you had not formed an opinion.
That's correct.
Let me go back in terms of where your sources were of gathering this information, of obtaining this information. Was it on TV? Was it in the newspaper? Was it in the internet? Was it a combination? And I'll shut up and let you talk.
Just the TV,
Okay. And do you recall whether it was local news or national news?
local news.
Do you recall what TV station in particular you would have been paying attention to?
No.
Do you kind of,
I
whatever
was-
one you want that
Yeah.
day?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you recall, was it at the time it happened, back in February, or was it more recently?
Back It seemed like a year ago.
Okay. And do you recall whether it was just one time or whether there was a combination of times?
Combination.
Okay. I guess my question is, living in this community, did you kind of pay more attention to it since it had happened here in Seminole County?
Yes.
Okay. And because you mentioned you were, in terms of a pretrial or a proceeding, right, where I think you mentioned one of the defense attorneys was present making an argument to the judge?
Say that again?
You mentioned one of the attorneys you heard talking to the judge?
Yeah.
Okay.
With regards to the funds.
Yes, ma'am. So I guess, did every time that this case appeared on the calendar or in court, did you focus on it in the news that day?
No.
Okay, so it was just by coincidence that you happened to pick up on that one in particular?
Yes.
Do you remember any other proceedings where you might have heard about it on the news and then focused on that?
No.
Okay. And do you recall the attorney, whether it was Mr. O'Mara or Mr. West, that you saw arguing? Do you recall? I don't know.
I don't know their names.
I don't know if you can see him from where he is. I'll have him stand up. Okay. Okay. And other than in a court proceeding, have you heard him speak in any other proceedings outside court, like at a news conference or anything like that?
Yes, but I don't
Okay.
remember
Okay.
what was said.
All right. Do you recall how many times you would have heard him in a news conference talking about the case?
Maybe 3 or 4 times?
Okay. Do you recall at this time what Mr. O'Mara would have said about, if he said anything about the facts of the case?
No.
Okay. Let me just backtrack a second. What you see on TV, do you always believe what people say on TV?
No.
Okay. And do you always believe attorneys when they talk on TV that they're saying what's accurate or not? Do you form opinions based on what the attorneys say?
No.
Okay. So the question is, if you, and you mentioned you saw Mr. O'Mara and on TV, if you get on the jury and then you go, wow, I remember Mr. O'Mara saying ABC, and you realize that that's not evidence in the case, can you disregard that?
Yes.
And even if it was evidence, can you rely on what the evidence happens in the courtroom as opposed to what Mr. O'Mara said in a news conference a month ago or 2 months ago?
Yes.
In other words, can you keep an open mind and agree to make a decision when everybody's here, the state, the defense, and the court? Can you do that?
Absolutely.
So you would not be influenced by Mr. O'Mara talking to the media when he expressed whatever he said?
No.
You can completely disregard that.
Absolutely.
Now, would you hold it against the state because myself or Mr. Guy or Mr. Manti, somebody on behalf of the state, or Ms. Corey, didn't have a news conference and said something in response to what Mr. O'Mara said? Would you hold that against us?
No.
That we didn't talk on the media on a daily basis?
No.
When you first heard about the case, did you form an opinion about the case one way or the other?
No.
And I apologize if I asked you this already. You mentioned your source of information was just local TV?
Yes.
Okay. Have you talked to anybody about it? Forget about the media right now. Have you talked to people about the case?
Yeah, my family.
Okay, well, that's a normal thing. Did they express opinions about the case?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that and realize that we're referring to you as B76, so just don't mention your family's members' names. If you could.
Okay. Well, our family's pretty, how do you say, open-minded.
Okay.
So a lot of our family members are like me, and they feel that everyone deserves a fair trial. And whenever we would hear something on the news, it would just be like, well, wait till the trial comes and then we'll determine.
Okay. So I gather when other family members saw something on the news, that you all would talk about it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I realize all of you were trying to keep an open mind as best you could.
Yes.
But does somebody have an opinion, even if they stated, I can still keep an open mind, but my opinion is, you know, he's guilty or he's innocent or such and such?
No.
Okay. So the
They
discussion...
if they said anything, it would be like, well, why was a kid out at night getting candy or, you know, whatever. Something simple like that, but not forming, you know, yet one way or the other.
You're saying you didn't arrive at the ultimate conclusion or opinion, but there were opinions expressed about whatever facts you heard.
Correct.
Okay. And I want to ask you a little bit about that. You mentioned somebody expressed, was it you or another family member expressed an opinion about why was the kid out late at
I
night?
think it was my daughter.
Okay. And was there any response from either yourself or your husband or somebody else in terms of, well, this is why maybe he was, or this is, you know?
Probably, but I can't remember.
I'm assuming it, like in my house, you know, when you have a discussion, people interact and everybody gives their opinions.
Yeah.
Was that what happened there?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but I can't remember exact details. It was a year ago.
Sure. Okay. And were those conversations that were had at the, I'm assuming, dining room table, did those occur back then and not recently?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you found out, obviously, you live in this great country, that you got a jury summons. Did that bring some more further discussions between the family as to what was going on? What would happen, whether you'd be lucky and get on this jury?
I had no idea it was today, you know.
Okay.
I just moved, so I wasn't really thinking, and none of us, we were all moving, so we weren't really thinking about this case.
Okay. So you had no discussions about
No.
the George Zimmerman case or
No.
Trayvon Martin or anything like that?
No.
Did any of the family members do any research about the case and include you in, oh, like your daughter, you know, went on, you know, Twitter or whatever?
Knowing my husband, he probably did, but he didn't share it with me.
Okay.
But he's very detailed, so he may have.
Okay. How about, not recently, but at the time, you know, back when it happened or since then, between, you know, February and, let's say, a month ago, do you believe he did some research on the case just to find out more about the case?
He researches everything, so probably,
The question is, did he share whatever research he had done?
no,
Did he express an opinion about the case, one way or the other?
no.
If you were to be picked on the jury and you're sitting there and then you're listening, you go, hold on, I do remember, even though I was honest when I was telling everybody that I did remember, I now, you know, remember something. If that came into mind, you understand in the law that you can't consider that. Do you think you could do that?
Yes.
Other than family members, have you heard any commentary from anybody else in the community? You know, either at work or neighbors or, you know, you're at a restaurant, somebody, and you know, the waitress or whatever tells you about the case. Have you heard anything else about the case from anybody?
I can't remember.
If what you put down here, best as you can remember, was not accurate, it didn't match what evidence you heard at the trial, can you agree to rely on what the evidence is at trial?
Yes.
Okay. You filled out this questionnaire this morning. It's now, you know, afternoon, almost evening, I guess we're getting to. Is there anything else that you can remember that you haven't told us already about the facts that you remember? Now you've had some time to think about it.
I think I remember something about his wife being in the media, but I think it had something to do with the funds again.
Anything else you remember other than that?
No.
Okay. You realize that in a trial, stuff that may have come out of the media may not come out of the trial.
Yes.
I'm assuming,
Yeah.
right? Can you agree to rely on just the evidence that comes out in the trial and apply the law that the judge will give to you in arriving at a decision in this case? And obviously using your God-given common sense.
Yes.
Can you do all that?
Yes.
Is there any question in your mind that you can be fair to both sides?
No question.
Okay. Disregard whatever media you've had?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
I have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any further questions. I'm sorry, Mr. O'Mara may have, or Mr. West may have some questions.
Mr. West, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Afternoon.
Hi.
My name is Don West. I'm co-counsel with Mr. O'Mara on behalf of Mr. Zimmerman. How long have you lived here in Seminole County?
Since 1981?
Just as a child then, I guess.
Yes.
Do you usually read newspapers and watch the local television stations?
I watch the local TV.
Do you subscribe or have an opportunity to read the Orlando Sentinel on occasion?
I do subscribe to it, but it's mainly for coupons. So if I want to read something, I go online.
Would you access the Orlando Sentinel newspaper online, for example?
No, just like the highlights that are on Yahoo. I might read those once in a while.
So if you're looking for headline type information, headline type news, what's your source for that?
Usually TV. You mean on the internet?
Well, let's say you woke up and you said, what's going on in the world today?
TV.
And that would usually be a local news station?
Yes.
Do you ever turn to the cable networks, CNN, HLN?
No, we don't have cable. We use antenna only.
The old school?
Well, it's a big one up in the attic, but yeah.
But you only get the local stations that are broadcast through the old style antenna?
That's correct.
So you don't have access to any cable stations at all?
No.
So locally, you would have the 3 major networks, or is there 4 maybe?
2, 6, 9, 35, 65,
Mhm.
27.
So your access to local news by television is pretty much limited to that?
Yes.
Okay. So to the extent that you followed the actual proceedings in the case, would it have been on one of those stations?
Yes.
Do you think that you actually watched some of the hearings before, or just heard about them?
I watched some of it.
The hearings that you may have watched were the ones that you've talked about?
Yes.
The one that mentioned the money, that would have been something that you watched in person as it was happening?
Yes.
Do you think you've watched any hearings since then?
No.
Had the news about this case caught your attention before that hearing?
Yes.
Were you aware from the news when George Zimmerman was arrested?
Yes.
And had you followed the news even before that?
You mean regarding other issues?
No, regarding this case, that you were aware of this case and that that the case was in the news before Mr. Zimmerman was arrested?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that you've seen Mr. O'Mara or heard him on television.
Yes.
Have you heard any spokespersons or attorneys for Trayvon Martin's family on television?
I've seen Trayvon Martin's family. I don't recall hearing their attorney.
By family, you mean Mr. Tracy Martin and Ms. Sabrina Fulton?
I think his parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. So you may have heard or watched a press conference where they spoke personally?
Yes.
Do you have any memory of hearing also one or more of the attorneys connected with the family?
No.
Do you recognize anyone here in the courtroom that you may have seen on television?
I'm not sure, but I think, is that his mom? No? Then no,
Yes,
I don't
ma'am.
remember. I'm not sure.
Could you estimate how many times you may have heard or read or talked about the case or some aspect of it since you first had it brought to your attention until now?
Well, are you counting times where they just announce like a brief 5-second something and that's it? Like, you know how sometimes they'll give you little tidbits and bits of something and...
Something like hearing today on Zimmerman.
Something like that. Well, if you include all of those, it could be 30 or more, but actually, there's only one trial that I saw regarding the money. And as far as the news media, I would say less than 10 times. Actually listening to it for more than a few minutes, not just a 5-second flash.
Where you actually watched a story
Yeah.
about the case?
Yeah.
Was there anything in those stories that you now remember that kind of stuck with you? Any issues, any evidence in particular?
The main thing I remember is when it first happened, the media talked about the altercation, and the young man was shot, and that Zimmerman was injured.
Right.
That was the main thing that I remember.
Did you ever see photographs on television or in any newspaper you came across of Mr. Zimmerman's injuries?
There was a video of him during one of the news conferences that showed the injury.
And what was your reaction when you saw those photos?
I thought it's possible they were, in a fight before the gun went off.
Have you were you aware of some of the public events associated with the case?
As far as,
Oh, demonstrations and protests and stuff.
yeah.
Generally watched or knew about that on television?
Yes.
Did that have any effect or impact on you and how you were viewing the case?
No.
Were you ever asked to, or did you consider signing a petition in connection with the case?
No.
Or donate money?
No.
I may not have heard your answer if you gave it, so I would ask you specifically if, when you and your husband have talked about the case, if he's expressed his opinion to you.
No.
And have you expressed your opinion to him?
He may have overheard me discussing it with my son or my daughter, but not directly with him.
Yeah, I have just one minute. Thank you, ma'am. Only following up briefly from the comment that you talked about the case a little bit with your husband, but you'd also talked about it some with your children. Have your children expressed opinions concerning this case to you, how they feel about it?
Yes.
Have they reached an opinion as to guilt or innocence?
No.
Or as to the importance of particular pieces of evidence or that kind of thing?
No.
Has it been more of a general discussion of the case rather than staking a position one way or another?
We're all kind of on the same page. We listen to everything, but we don't believe what we hear on TV. We like to base our final judgment on the whole story, all the evidence. So that's kind of what they share with me is they'll say something like, well, what if that was your family member? And we discuss how things should be fair and how, either side. You have to hear everything before you can base an opinion, and that's pretty much how my kids voice their opinion or
So-
discuss that case.
Even though you've been exposed through the media to lots of things
Yes.
about the case, you feel confident and comfortable with the idea that, should you sit on the jury, your decision would be based on the evidence that comes in the courtroom,
Yes.
and if there might be other things you've heard, whether true or not, that would be relatively easy for you to sort out and make your decision just on what you hear right here.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. When council's ready, please approach. Okay, Mr. Zimmerman, just so you know, there was different categories that we had put some of the potential jurors in based upon their responses to the questionnaire. And your attorneys have had an opportunity to, you've had an opportunity to read, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you had an opportunity to discuss with your attorneys how you felt about the questionnaires and what categories you thought should be, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and do you have any objections to the categories and the excusals for cause that your attorneys have indicated to the court?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, and we're going to bring in, there's 20 people, there's 3 that we saw this afternoon and 17 waiting to be them in just for the purpose of admonishing them about what they cannot do overnight and have them come back tomorrow. Then there are some other jurors that are still downstairs brought up downstairs with counsel with them. And counsel said that they were willing to waive your appearance to go downstairs for that admonishment. Do you have any objections to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so as soon as these jurors come in, potential jurors, we'll go ahead and go through that. And then after that, we will recess for the day. back tomorrow. Those of you who were on the 4th floor, the deputies will take you when you come into the courthouse back up to the 4th floor. Those of you who were seated back here will be brought by the deputies back here. I want to give you instructions for overnight, and I'm going to ask you again in the morning that you follow these instructions. First of all, you're not to read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case. Do I have your assurances that you will abide by that instruction? Thank you. You are not to discuss the case amongst yourselves, but you don't really know each other, or with anybody else. That means when you go home to family, friends, and if they want to talk about the case or call you on the phone, you're to tell them that you have been instructed not to have any conversations whatsoever about this case. Do I have your assurance that you'll agree, that you will abide by that? Yes. You are not to drive by any of the, you haven't heard any description of anything, but you're not to drive by any of the places concerning this case. You're not to do any independent research about this case. That includes that you're not to use your any electronic device to get on the internet, to do any independent research about the case, people, places, things, terminology. Do I have your assurances that you will abide by that instruction? Yes. And finally, you're not to read or create any emails, text messages, Twitters, tweets, blogs, or any social networking pages about this case. Do I have your assurance that you will abide by these instructions? Yes. Okay, and when I see you tomorrow, I'm going to ask you if you have abided by those instructions. One final thing I'm going to ask of you is if you're around somebody and they insist on talking about the case, please leave them at once. I know it might be difficult if it's a family member, but just, leave them and tell them you're not going to listen to anything they have to say. And if it's somebody who's insisted upon doing that, if you'll please report it to one of the court deputies, and they will let me know. Do I have your assurance you'll abide by that instructions? Yes. Okay. Another thing is the attorneys have been instructed not to have any contact with you whatsoever. So as you walk into the courthouse tomorrow, if you see one of the attorneys and they seem to turn the other way, please don't think they're being rude or discourteous or just trying to avoid any appearance of an improper contact with you. With that, you all know that those of you who were on the 4th floor will be taken back there on the 4th floor. Those of you who are back here on the 5th floor, you'll be brought back there. You are now excused for the evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. 9 Just one second.
It's comfortably cold in the courtroom for us.
Yeah.
The juror may want to know that they may want to bring sweaters or jackets.
I will tell them. I have no control over the temperature in this courtroom. Sometimes I'm very cold myself, and sometimes it's warm. So if you'll bring a sweater to accommodate the temperature in the courtroom, please make sure you do that, okay? Thank you. If you'll please follow Deputy Jarvis. Yes.
One of the jurors said it's 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock, 9 a.m. Yes, ma'am. When you come into the courthouse on the bottom floor, one of the deputies will get you together and bring you where you're supposed to go. Is that where you?
We want them all to go back to the jury lounge where they were this morning.
Well, there's.
We're going to bring them out.
Okay. Then at 9 a.m., go to the jury lounge where you were this morning and you will be called out. Okay? Thank you all very much. Court is in recess except for counsel. If one more thing. Yes, you may. Yes, you may.